Hello, my name is Brian Burnham, and this is Module 12, a case study for Dr. Spleichel, EDL 851. All right, I've got a lot of information, and some of it repeats itself on slides, so I'm not going to read every single sentence, but I will try to, summarize and present this thing the way it's meant to be done. So what do we know? I have a teacher named Mrs. Stevens that we've observed multiple times throughout the course of the school year, and the same observations continue to be seen. Both her students and from her. Her students seem to be unmotivated, disengaged. They show little respect towards her. She seems irritable during our post-observation conference. She's hostile to suggestions and outright difficult to communicate with. She refuses to also acknowledge that she has any inadequacies in her teaching. I gave her another chance, and I observed her the following Monday, and I observed similar things. With the end of the year near, I have to decide whether or not to recommend Mrs. Stevens for rehire, which ultimately would grant her tenure as well. After witnessing all that I've observed and thinking about the situation long and hard, as of right now, I'm deciding not to recommend Ms. Stevens for rehire, denying her tenure. However, there is a special circumstance that I'm trying to employ, and I'll go into that as I go through my options. Once given the news that she would not be retained, she became very upset. She vehemently denied my findings. She expressed her disagreement and stated that she would fight this decision in court if she had to, because she feels like she was not giving proper guidance or suggestions on how to improve, but rather was just told what areas needed to be improved. Okay, I continued to observe students insufficiently engaged. They appeared disinterested in classroom proceedings. Mrs. Stevens clearly is intelligent. She has excellent knowledge of her subject area. She, however, appears to be incapable of motivating her students, and her classroom management skills are severely lacking. When I stand outside the classroom and just observe from a distance, students are talking at will. There's considerable movement within the classroom. However, when I enter the room, the students settle down. Clearly, they know how to behave, and they're capable of doing so when an authority figure is present. However, Ms. Stevens does not seem to have the students' attention or respect. I called a face-to-face meeting, post-visitation conference, and I found her to be irritable, hostile to suggestions, difficult to communicate with, argumentative. She also said that there's no conclusive evidence of improved classroom achievement based on student involvement. Okay, I've gone over these already. Once the evaluation is completed, recommendation to retain was made. Ms. Stevens' tenure will be denied. As principal, I'm trying to look to avoid this catastrophe, quote unquote, basically having a bad teacher in my building for years to come. The evaluation that I've seen in this report, the sheet that they showed us, doesn't seem to be very thorough, especially since we're making such a big decision. Clearly, this is taking place at the end of the school year, probably in the spring, and we're determining tenure, so this is probably after a 3 or a 5 year stint in our district. People involved are myself, Mrs. Stevens, and the school board, the superintendent, which are the decision makers, and I've also added a legal representation to the end of this once I go over my options. Are there any legal or ethical issues at play here? As of right now, I don't think there are. The evaluation form shown in the case study doesn't seem to be very thorough to be making such a big decision. So I have a moral integrity issue, ethical issue with that situation within myself. I don't feel comfortable basing tenure off of simply looking at somebody's personality, their ability to administer discipline within their classroom, their professional interests and their attitudes. I think there's more that goes into it. Obviously, some of those others are important, the relationship with others, their ability to teach, but I don't see any places for actionable feedback. Is tenure being determined off of a teacher's personality? I really struggle with that. Has she been given the opportunities to improve? She stated that she hasn't. I need to see the data that shows that. There's a lot of information lacking from this presentation. Nobody's been harmed yet with this. However, we are talking about someone's livelihood. Doesn't appear to be a breach of contract, but with teacher unions and things like that in place in some places, it could be something that we need to make sure we're crossing all T's and dotting all I's. The root of the situation is Mrs. Stevens is facing not receiving tenure due to several subpar classroom observations. However, as the principal, I'm not sure we've done enough throughout the year to offer support and improve and offer her high quality actionable feedback to warrant making such a large scale decision. That's kind of where I'm at right now with this whole scenario. Okay, synthesizing the facts. We talked about this. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. As far as the place goes, we were not giving any information about the school. So I went ahead and just assumed it's at my school currently. And we have about 1,650 students. The admin team consists of myself. I have 4 assistant principals. We have approximately 140 teachers. It's in a somewhat affluent area, upper middle class, suburban location about 25 miles south of Nashville, Tennessee. We have a supportive community. The parents carry high expectations for our school system. They do pay higher property taxes than people or other counties around us. So they expect our education dollars to be, spent on high quality teachers and high quality educations. We have multiple subject areas that carry standard, honors, and AP level courses. We have a student support services department, that special ed, that contains 17 teachers and TAs. We have a full-time ESL teacher, a full-time instructional coach, and a full-time math tutor on site daily. You guys can pause and read this. I'm not going to read every single one of these because I need to move on. But I'm honestly not sure if the conflict of the situation could be damaging to the community. Obviously, if this goes to court, it would be very damaging. If she goes and on some, goes to newspapers or anything like that, that could be damaging. But I don't know if we have enough information to warrant the decision that we're making, given what we've been shown so far. I'm struggling with making the decision based on the facts that we have. What individuals or groups have an important stake in this outcome? Obviously, myself, I'd be losing a teacher in the building, but also Ms. Stevens. We're talking about potentially letting her go. Being a teacher is her livelihood. She earns her money and provides for her family like that. So that's important. Have all the relevant stakeholders been consulted? In this situation, given the facts that we have, I do think we've consulted all of the correct people, but I want to go to my supervisor, which is my superintendent, and I'll explain that in a few minutes, to involve them as well, because I have an idea to possibly make this situation better for all parties. Okay, I'm not going to go over these specifically. I do want to say option 1 is to do nothing. Option 2 is to approach my superintendent to request special permission to not grant Mrs. Stevens tenure this year, but also I don't want to let her go. I want to see if she'd be willing to come back next year with the understanding that she could earn tenure at the end of next year, but she needs to understand that there's a lot of parameters that I would like her to go through and make sure that we're getting her everything she needs to, improve in the areas that we think she's deficit in. Option 3 is to follow the stated plan in the case study and not to grant Ms. Stevens her tenure. I need to be prepared for what that looks like if she goes to court. Option 4 is to grant her tenure and move forward, hoping that she improves as she goes. Obviously, we all know that she hasn't up to this point. She probably won't. And then option 5 is to grant Mrs. Stevens tenure, but only under basically the same options as option 2. The difference is option 2, she's not getting tenure this year. She has the opportunity to earn it next year. Option 5, she would be getting tenure. However, when you do that, even if she agrees to do certain things, if she has tenure, now you're kind of up the creek without a paddle if she chooses to not do all the things that we've asked her to do the following year. Pros and cons. Option 1, to do nothing. I don't think there's any pros. I'm not even sure this is a fair option. I'm not sure if I read this right, if I'm taking the right approach. But if we do nothing, then there's no decision being made, and we have to make a decision because tenure is involved here. So I don't think option 1 is an option. Option 2, to request special permission from my supervisor to grant tenure, or technically not to grant tenure, but for her to earn it the following year. It provides a clearer picture, and I can have myself, along with my admin staff to continue to assess and see where she's at. The cons is it's special treatment, it sets a precedent, and it begs the question, is it worth it? Option 3, we talked about denying her tenure, which is what was stated in the case study. The pros, it gets what appears to be a poor teacher out of the building, and it opens up a spot to bring in potentially someone better. The cons is it loses a teacher off my staff. Maybe I don't fill that position because of lack of teachers. Also, we have a potential legal battle coming down the pipe. Option 4 is to grant her tenure and hope she improves. This keeps the teacher in my building, allows me to know for sure that I have a teacher filled for that position, and it avoids legal proceedings. The cons is it potentially brings a poor teacher back into my building for years to come. And then option 5, you can read, grant her tenure, but like I stated, if once you grant tenure, now she has tenure. So there's no guarantee that she's going to do the things that she has set up for her right here in front. Pros, it accomplishes the same thing as option 2, but without having to bother my superior for asking for special treatment. The con, as I said, is it grants tenure. And now I may have a teacher in the building that doesn't need to be there. I think option 2 is the best. It provides me with guidance in a situation because I'm going to be speaking to my superintendent throughout the process, also getting legal involved. It also allows me to have ideas from another perspective, prevents me from granting tenure and having a bad teacher on my staff for years to come, but it gives her the opportunity to earn tenure if she agrees to do everything that we have in place. I'm probably too optimistic, and I believe there's good and strengths in everyone. Part of my job as the building leader is to find those strengths, amplify and project them out into my building, make my staff feel cared for and supported. The steps that I would take, step 1, I'd need to contact my superintendent. They need to be involved in this situation. Step 2, I need to ask for the special permission that I'm thinking about. Run it by them. I obviously have to have their permission to go forward with this. I need to be prepared to receive a no from my superintendent, and I also must be prepared for Mrs. Stevens to say no to this proposal, but she needs to understand that this is her only option in terms of keeping her job. If that's the case, then she might be willing to agree to our guidelines. Next, if assuming that the superintendent grants my special circumstance and treatment, I'll need to set the meeting up. She needs to know that she's allowed to bring her legal representation because we will have ours, along with myself and the superintendent. If she knows that lawyers will be present, then she may back off of her threat. It's just probably best practice to have everything in place in the event that something goes awry. Step 4, to conduct the meeting. Lay out all the parameters of her being allowed to stay on as a teacher in our building. Make sure she's well aware of all the expectations. She needs to have a mentor teacher. She's going to have a common planning period with that teacher. She's going to conduct peer observations twice per grading period, and then she's going to follow those up with face-to-face reflection time with me. And then we're going to allow her to choose from a list of PDs that I have selected to help her improve in very specific areas. What could happen? Well, we as a district need to be prepared for all options. You can pause this and read everything, but basically she could easily accept our offer, take the help she needs to improve, and be appreciative of getting another year, or she could refuse this olive branch and move forward with legal action. The reaction could also fall somewhere in between, but we have to be prepared for everything. Who needs to know? Legal needs to be involved. My superintendent needs to be involved. Mrs. Stevens, any lawyers that she has or wants to bring to the table. The Board of Education, because they are decision makers in the process. We just need to be prepared for everything. Warn, don't threaten. She needs to understand that what's at stake here. This is probably her only option to remain a teacher in our district. I don't feel like we're in violation of anything. We probably have the records to show all of this. We just don't have that information in this case study. So I'm going off of a lot of what ifs type scenarios, but she needs to understand this is basically her only option. If this plan doesn't work, or what's the alternate thought? If it doesn't work, I'm prepared just to not grant her tenure. That's just the bottom line. Pause and look at it. And this is all I've got for this presentation.